Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. 42-29, the Lions take down the Seahawks on Monday Night Football. Career nights for Geno Smith and Jared Goff. Goff, 18 for 18, 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. When you're rooting against the Lions, as a Vikings fan would, it's kind of frustrating when the opposing quarterback doesn't throw an incompletion the entire night. And the only one that he did was called back because of penalty. And Geno Smith, on the other hand, almost threw for 400 yards. He was 38 for 56, 395, a touchdown, and a pick. Both offenses looked good the entire night. It was an impressive showing from the Seattle offense, and the Lions offense was frankly unstoppable for much of the night. Starting off with Seattle, so they come into the night undefeated, one of only a handful of undefeated teams left in the league. And I think a lot of people saw this as an opportunity to kind of prove it, to show, are they actually up there with, the Vikings were another one of those teams. People were wondering, are they as good as their record shows? And I think going into Green Bay showed that. Seattle has the opportunity after beating, the Broncos, they're playing the Patriots, they're playing weaker opponents throughout the season so far. At Detroit's a real test. And the offense rose to the occasion. They were really good most of the night. And I actually think there were a handful of really big plays that were taken back from Seattle, sometimes on penalties that deserved it, sometimes in situations where it didn't, whether it was the fourth down play at the end of the game with the pick, the 2-point conversion to DK Metcalf, which should have stood. That I don't know how replay doesn't review that, or just them screwing up and DK fumbling earlier in the game, which kind of showed to be super important as Detroit scored right after that. The offenses were just trading touchdowns most of the game. That's the reason Detroit was up 2 scores throughout most of it. So a lot of situations where Seattle kind of shot themselves in the foot. And that goes back to my take from the entire year, which is just that Seattle is the same team that they were last year, the same team they were the year before, where they can give any team in the NFL a run for their money on any given night. But are they really a threat? No, not really. The San Francisco sweating about the Seahawks? No. I mean, there's the Cardinals, the Rams, and Seattle. Who are they really scared of in that division? No one. And then that's because when the offense is on, the defense doesn't show up. It was embarrassing tonight. They couldn't stop Detroit, whether it was running or throwing. I mean, for as good as Jared Goff looked, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery were running all over the place as well. So that's why I'm just not buying the Seahawks as a legitimate NFC contender. When I'm looking at teams like the Lions or the Vikings, Green Bay, San Francisco, all these teams, I think they'd beat Seattle in a big game situation here. And that's not to make it, I don't want to take anything away from Geno tonight. I thought he was awesome most of the game, but down in the red zone at the end, they couldn't score. Like they turn over on downs. That's the sort of thing that Seattle's been doing for a few years. They just can't win against the really good teams, even when the offense does show up. So I'm not making fun of Seattle when I'm saying that they're just not a legitimate contender. They're a very tough out. They're like the Steelers in some ways. The Steelers in the AFC, really good team. Jack's here all the time, and he's pumping them up. He's a Steeler fan. How can he not? But no one is afraid of the Steelers in the playoffs. No one is. It's the same team every year. They lose in the first round. That's it. And tonight was an opportunity to kind of put those demons a little bit behind you and get a big win against a team that everyone agrees is an NFC contender. And they came close, but they couldn't do it. On the Detroit side, and I also want to say, like, Seattle all year will be like this. They'll be good throughout the year. They might even make the playoffs. As far as Detroit goes, though, I think Detroit fans are very happy with this win against an undefeated team, whether or not you believe in Seattle. At the same time, there are some question marks that need to be answered. The positives, when the offense is good, they're unstoppable. It's kind of this NFC North, the offenses here between Green Bay when Love is healthy and going, the Vikings with all their playmakers and Darnold playing at the level he's at, and Detroit, the offenses are just amazing. And Detroit can go punch for punch with anybody in the National Football League when Goff is good. And Goff, he's heard all the noise. They mentioned it on the broadcast that he's heard what people are saying about his performance so far this season. And to respond with an 18 for 18 night, 292 yards and 2 touchdowns, he was literally perfect. He did nothing wrong. And when you get that Jared Goff and the offensive line is mauling people the way they were, there were a few highlights that they showed during the game. and Seattle defensive linemen are legitimately picked up on one foot. Like, that's how massive this offensive line is for Detroit. And I don't understand anyone, Jack doesn't like running backs. I don't get anyone who cannot find value in a star running back. It's blows my mind how people can't see that a player like Jahmyr Gibbs, players like David Montgomery are not just great players, but game changers. Maybe it's because I grew up watching Adrian Peterson and was spoiled, and all I knew was running backs is my offense growing up. Christian Ponder wasn't going to get the job done, so it had to be the running back. But when I watch Jahmyr Gibbs have the football in his hands, it's electrifying. He's unbelievably fast. He could turn the corner and take it to the house on any play. And David Montgomery is breaking leg tackles, and is unbelievable tonight. So when Detroit gets going, and the way that they have kind of inserted Jameson Williams into the offense this year, they can attack you in so many ways. Amon-Ra's a stud. He's a top 10 receiver in the game. And Laporta is finally starting to get his feet, pick his feet off the ground. So I was really impressed with the Detroit offense. 42 points is no joke. The Seattle defense was horrible all night, but there's a reason for that. On the other hand, the negatives for Detroit fans, like, what the hell's going on with the defense? It's outside of Aiden Hutchinson, who's an animal. This is not a much better defense from the one we saw a year ago. I mean, Carlton Davis had his moments tonight. They talked about him a lot on the broadcast, but Geno threw for 400 yards. Kenneth Walker was running all over the place. He only finished with 80 yards, but he had 3 touchdowns, and he had a lot of big-time catches, too. He had a couple. And if you look back at the end of last season, remember, CeeDee Lamb went nuts against the Lions secondary. I think that was actually the fantasy championship game for a lot of people, was the Cowboys versus the Lions. CD went berserk. Jefferson went berserk. The problem was they couldn't guard number one receivers. And tonight, DK went for 7 catches and 104 yards. Could have had a lot more. And if you're a Lions fan, I think you're a little bit concerned about what's going on here. The secondary hasn't looked that great. Baker, I thought Baker had a really good game against them a couple weeks ago. They played well in Arizona. Got to give credit where it's due. But the NFC North, as I just said, is filled with teams that are lighting it up right now. And if you put Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison out there against the Lions secondary, or you put the Packers weapons, all 4 of their guys out there, eventually when Watson gets back, I don't know if they could stop them. And luckily for Detroit, their offense can go, as I said, punch for punch with anyone, so they could be in any game. But in a big situation, if Goff has an off game, I don't know if this defense can save you. So I currently view, we were talking during the game, I was watching it with my family and some friends. We were talking about the top 5 teams in the NFL right now. And again, I'm a Vikings fan, so I don't want to be too biased, but I really do think the Vikings are one of them. In no particular order, the Vikings would be one of them. You have to put the Chiefs in there until they lose. Just have to. The Rashee Rice injury hurts a lot, but 2-time Super Bowl champions now. The Ravens, I think, after their performance against Dallas and Buffalo, I still put San Francisco up there, even though they're 2-2 on the season. They're a really good team. When they're healthy, they are rolling. And then that 5th spot, I think, goes to Detroit. And they could even be higher. It depends where you could rank those teams in any order. I'm not going to complain. But Detroit's really, really good. It's just that big question mark of the defense. And if Aiden Hutchinson, God forbid, if Aiden Hutchinson gets hurt, this defense is going to get torn to shreds. It's going to be an absolute disaster. I don't know how teams are ever setting up a tight end to block Aiden Hutchinson now. I've seen like 2 or 3 highlights this year where he just runs people over and creates a big play or a holding penalty to destroy a drive. He's having a borderline like defensive player of the year. He could have that kind of season by the time we're done here. But yeah, that's where I stand on Detroit. I think Detroit is as good as anyone when they're clicking. But then they have these showings like this on defense that make me question. But when Jared Goff shows up, yeah, they are easily a top 5 team in the NFL. They're unstoppable. So 42-29, final score tonight. Lions 3-1. You have to think that Lions fans, if you told them they were 3-1 right now, that the Packers would be their big competition at the moment. And I think everyone in the NFC North is surprised to see the Vikings there. I'm kind of waiting for them to collapse. So Detroit's in a really good spot. Seattle, it's so painful for them because this is a situation where you want to stay 2 games up on San Francisco as long as you can, because you know at some point, everyone listening knows at some point, that San Fran will get hot and pull off like 5 or 6 in a row probably. And Seattle's just going to watch that lead kind of slowly slip away. I think it's happened I'm trying to remember, not sure if they've had these leads over the last few years, but it just feels inevitable. They're a good team though, but they're losing the wild card. So, all right, that'll wrap it up. 42-29, the Lions win, go to 3-1, and we move on to week 5. We'll have week 5 content. We've got week 5 preview coming out on Thursday. Mailbag as well. Looking forward to it, and we'll see you then.